Okay, so a little bit of a fun video, how I made my first $100,000, and let's just say like US dollars just for concreteness. So maybe I'll have two things. So how I made my first passive $100,000 and how I made my active $100,000. Okay, so the passive one obviously is going to be a boring answer. The active one might be a bit more exciting. The passive one basically is I made it in scholarships that I got from the university. Um, so I got scholarships for achieving like 99.95. I got scholarships for getting certain things in like the maths research projects and all this kind of stuff. So um, that if you add it all up, I guess it wasn't that much back then. It seemed like they only increase it every time the other university increases it. But if you add all that up, I think it's around $100,000, and maybe like a little bit of just kind of casual tutoring on the side that kind of came with being in these positions. Okay, so what about active $100,000? So if we don't count that 100,000 and you count the active 100,000, then I would say I made my first $100,000 playing poker in the USA. Um, which sounds like it depends. There's kind of two ways people interpret this. Like there's kind of one camp which is like the people who actually know about gambling. Okay, the people who know about gambling, not necessarily from like being good at gambling, but just like they have experience with people who gamble, and it's generally very taboo and it's frowned upon. Gambling really does destroy lives. Okay, so people like lose an insane amount of money gambling. Okay, because in gambling, what happens is like the association with money becomes removed when the money turns into the chips, and then the chips can have much higher denominations than any currency, and then people end up sort of losing like hundreds of thousands in one sitting. Okay, and then it's not even over for some of them. They try to chase the loss, and then it just gets worse and worse. Okay, and then you have no understanding of what's going on, and so they feel they're unlucky, even though the same thing would have repeated itself indefinitely till the end of time. Okay. The other camp, I guess, is people who haven't really have as much experience with gambling, but they could imagine how someone who was good at maths could succeed at gambling endeavors. Okay. Um, and yeah, so it was kind of interesting because um, so I played a bit of poker before I went to America, and I was a winning player in Australia. But I wasn't really like serious, and I didn't do it very much. But when I went to the US, I was actually like what I took to the when I what the game I took to the US was actually a losing game. Like I couldn't beat the players in the US because in the US they're much more willing to put the money in to the middle, and so I met a lot of resistance. Okay, and so I had to make better decisions in order to beat the game. And so yeah, like I guess the fundamental the maths side of things is what gave me confidence that I would win, because I think even like the better players that were good from experience didn't understand the fundamentals of the game, because like for example they didn't understand like there were six ways to be dealt pocket aces, two aces for from like 1,326 possibilities, and that's the kind of stuff like like if you're good at maths you can actually literally calculate that on like as you're playing the game during in the table, because like a lot of the time you're just folding and waiting. You can actually think about sort of the actual odds of things happening, and gambling is fundamentally like about evaluating odds. And when your evaluation is better, you make more money. Okay. But then there's this other side of things. I've noticed like a lot of people who might seem like they're kind of good at maths, but they end up being terrible at poker. So there must be some other element to it, and I think it might be you can't just say it's courage, okay? Because like courage comes from maybe not knowing if it's the right thing to do and doing it. So you kind of like you're taking like a risk, but but I think a lot of it is actually just sort of knowing or being more sure about what to do just by taking like a practical perspective. Okay, so like instead of worrying about all the possibilities, you only worry about the possibilities that have a actual like a higher probability of actually occurring. You kind of it's like a maybe like a physics approach. You kind of ignore all the negligible factors and you only focus on the main ones, and or sometimes even just deal with the problems as they come up. Um, can be a really good way to alleviate a lot of those how would you call them? Maybe like logical nerves. But if you combine those two, so it's kind of like a willingness to compete and practicality to execute on ideas, and then actually having ideas from sort of mathematical foundations, then you can be a winning poker player. Okay, and I feel like when I was playing live poker in Oregon, um, like a lot of those, because it's so close to Vegas, a lot of those guys end up playing pro in Vegas. Like I started off losing, but over time, like I don't think I still feel like there hasn't been anyone that's crushed those games as much as I have. But like obviously, like over time, consistently, the actual amounts, there's obviously people who's done better. But just for the short period that I was there, I felt like I did quite well, and it was much more satisfying because I basically started losing at the start. Okay, like I was used to just like betting and everyone folding, and then there I was betting and everyone was calling, and then some people even raising me and stuff like it's like totally unexpected because and also the stakes were a little bit higher. I'd expect people to be more timid because I was more timid, but um, see like they had a weird stake of like 1-3, like $1 $3 blinds, which is very strange. Um, yeah, and I came at a pretty strange time because like because the '08 there was like an '08 financial crisis and I came in '09, and so there were a lot of people who were trying to maybe like rebuild their wealth or kind of took poker on more seriously because they no longer had their original jobs or something like this, which kind of um, gave me more opportunities to play because there was a lot more games going on. Um, but at the same time, I should mention that like I'm not like in an absolute sense, I'm not a good poker player. Like I'm good for like so like in a lot of things, I'm like good for amateur poker player. Like I can beat. I'd like to think I could beat any amateur at poker. But when it comes to like professional poker, and I'm not talking about like professional like live poker. I'm talking about like online poker, like the Phil Galfons, like the kind of online, or even people more that like play like game theory optimal poker. Like like yeah, I don't have the skills to play online poker. Okay, I know that about myself, and I think that's also saved me a lot of money. But when it comes to live poker, like I feel like no one's squeezed more value out of the live poker game than I have in the stakes that I played because I just like you wouldn't believe the kind of chip stacks I've built and um the kind of thin value I got. But maybe a lot of that was also luck. I mean, I probably ran really well for like just that whole period. It wasn't even that long a time. It was just like, a period of 4 years. Um, but I ran incredibly well, and so I managed to win more than $100,000. Um, I took some of it to Macau and won a bit more, um, but yeah, that's my first 100,000 with a bit of a rant. If you have any questions, maybe something I can talk about more, you can leave it in the comments and subscribe for the answer.